What if I told you that a memory, something you can't even touch, could be a secret weapon in business? Well, today we're cracking open a fascinating strategic plan from 2006 that's all about that idea. We're going to look at how an iconic Argentine toy brand, Rosti, which had been off the market for decades, planned an absolutely incredible comeback. How? By tapping into the power of pure nostalgia. All right, let's get right into it.
So our story kicks off in a pretty unexpected place. We're not in some fancy boardroom, we're in the dusty basement of a musical instrument factory over in Brazil. The year is 2005, and someone stumbles upon these old, forgotten steel molds. But listen, these weren't just any old chunks of metal. They were the original molds for Rosti, a toy that was once the absolute king of construction toys in Argentina. Now, for the Demare family, who ran the toy company Demare SA, finding these molds was way more than just a lucky break. It was like finding a piece of their own family history, a direct link to their father. And of course, it was a massive, once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity staring them right in the face. You have to understand, back in the 70s, Rosti wasn't just a toy, it was the toy. It completely dominated the market. But then, poof, it just vanished. Production stopped, and it left an entire generation of adults with nothing but amazing memories. For more than 15 years, it was basically a ghost. And now, the Demare brothers had to figure out if it was time to bring that ghost back to life. So this discovery kicks off this huge internal debate. It's a classic head versus heart situation. On one side, you have the heart, the powerful emotional pull of reviving a family legacy. And on the other side, you have the head, the cold, hard logic of business. The problem was, they weren't exactly pointing in the same direction. That really was the million-dollar question. And what made it even trickier was that their current brand, another construction toy called Blocky, was already a success. It was stable, it was profitable. So you have to ask yourself, why on earth would you risk messing with the winning formula just for a trip down memory lane? Okay, so this slide just perfectly lays out the tension they were feeling. The number one risk was something called cannibalization, the fear that Rosti would just steal sales from their own successful product, Blocky. Not to mention, kids were all about video games now, not physical toys. But the potential rewards? Whoa. Tapping into a brand people already loved, honoring their family, and crucially, creating a new, more profitable premium product. All right, so how do you solve a problem like this? You can't just go with your gut. You need data. So they put their money where their mouth was. They invested a whopping $80,000 into some seriously deep market research to figure out what modern parents and kids were actually thinking in 2006. And what they found was fascinating. Turns out, there was this deep anxiety simmering among parents. They felt like they were in this constant battle for their kids' attention, pitting creative, hands-on play against the hypnotic pull of digital screens. They'd call screens a necessary evil or even an electronic babysitter, and you could just feel the guilt they had about it. And then bam! This quote from a parent in one of the focus groups just nails it. They saw construction toys as the antidote to just passively staring at a screen. This was their opening. Parents weren't just looking for another toy. They were actively searching for a solution, something to get their kids' imaginations firing again. But that wasn't even the biggest bombshell from the research, not by a long shot. They stumbled upon a secret weapon, something they didn't even realize was so powerful, just sitting there, waiting to be used. 100%. Think about that. Among all the adults they talked to, Rosti had 100% spontaneous brand recall. Every single person remembered it, instantly, without any prompting. For a product that had been off the market for over 15 years, that's just insane. That kind of brand equity is practically unheard of. And it gets even crazier. Rosti wasn't just a brand name anymore. It had become what we call a generic trademark. You know, like how we say Kleenex instead of tissue, or Google it instead of search for it? In Argentina, people didn't say, let's play with construction blocks. They said, let's play with Rosti. That right there is marketing gold.
And it wasn't just that they remembered the name, it's how they remembered it. The feelings were overwhelmingly positive. They associated it with national pride, with high quality, with being smart. But the most powerful connection of all, it was deeply tied to their own childhoods. It wasn't just a toy, it was part of who they were. That was the brand's DNA, and man, was it strong. Okay, so armed with this incredible, game-changing insight, the team's next move was to map out the modern toy battlefield. They had to figure out where this sleeping giant could fit in.
The market back then was pretty clearly defined. At the very top, you had the global behemoth, Lego, super premium, imported, and expensive. Then, kind of in the middle, you had a trusted local brand, Miss Ladrios. And way down at the budget end, competing purely on price, was their very own product, Blocky. And when they laid it all out like that, boom! There it was. A huge, gaping hole in the market. A spot for something premium accessible. You know, a toy that felt high quality and had that strong local pride, but wasn't nearly as expensive as Lego. It was a space that was practically tailor-made for Rasty's return. All right, so they've got the brand power, they've found the perfect spot in the market. Now for the hard part, the strategy. And that brings us right back to that big, scary word we talked about earlier, cannibalization.
But here's where things get really, really smart. They realize that not all cannibalization is bad. In fact, it can be a good thing. It's a concept called positive cannibalization. The idea is you deliberately let your new, more profitable product steal sales from your old, less profitable one. It's all about the profit margin. So let's break down the math real quick. On a standard set of their existing toy, Blocky, they were making about $30 in profit.
But with Rasty?
Well, because of all that brand love and nostalgia, they could charge a premium. So the estimated profit on a Rasty set was $50.
Do you see what's happening here? Every single time a customer chose Rasty instead of Blocky, the company actually made an extra $20. Their biggest fear, this idea of cannibalization, was suddenly flipped on its head and turned into their biggest financial advantage. Absolutely brilliant. And this all led to their final two-brand strategy, which was just a masterclass. The plan was simple. Market Rastiki to the adults, hit them right in the heart with all that nostalgia, and talk about intergenerational heritage. Meanwhile, Blocky would be for the kids, fun, colorful TV ads that have different prices, different marketing messages, even be sold in different stores. Two brands coexisting perfectly, without stepping on each other's toes.
So, when you put it all together, the emotional connection, the deep market research, the clever financial modeling, the competitive analysis, the final verdict became pretty much a no-brainer.
And the answer from this analysis was a resounding yes. This whole story is just a perfect lesson on how a local brand can absolutely take on the global Goliaths. Not by trying to be like them, but by leaning into what makes them unique, their history, their culture, and their deep connection with their people. It proves that sometimes your biggest competitive advantage isn't about the future, it's about your past. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world that's always obsessed with what's next, maybe a company's most powerful asset is simply a shared memory.